Welcome back to the channel. I'm Joe. This week I'm going to show you a cheap and easy way to remove bearings from your full suspension mountain bike links, so stay tuned. Pretty much like it says, we're going to remove some bearings from our suspension links. They make actual pullers, presses and pullers for these. You can get them online. Not super expensive. If you're going to be doing it a lot, might want to have it. You can do it once every couple of years. Maybe you don't. And if you're like me and you've got boxes, toolboxes full of old hardware and sockets and stuff, you can probably find enough stuff hanging around in your garage to do it for free. So let's take a closer look. First, you're going to want to figure out which direction you want to press your bearings from. Let's take a look at this one right here in the middle of the shot. If you look at it from this side and then look at it from the inside, you can see that it's much smaller looking from the inside, meaning we need to press it out towards the camera, essentially. So we need to have something that will fit inside that hole and fit up against that bearing, and then we need to put something on this side that is bigger than the bearing itself, so as we pull it out of the piece of aluminum, it has someplace to go. So in this case, what we're going to do, I have a little nut here that's got a flange on it that is pretty much the exact same size as what I need to go in here. I guess it's worth mentioning that if you are wanting to reuse your bearings, proceed at your own risk. There is a chance that you could press them apart basically and push your bearings apart. I've done stuff like this in the past, so I kind of have an idea of what I'm doing. You want to get as big of a surface as you can to take up as much surface as you can of the bearing, therefore spreading out the load, and you're not going to want the bearings not going to want to come apart. If you're not going to reuse the bearings, not a problem at all. So what I've got, like I said, a flange nut. You could use a socket. I have got a little like aluminum spacer. I've got poly spacers, all kinds of stuff that I've had floating around the garage. But in this particular one, we're going to use this. Like I said, fits perfect up in there. I needed a little bit extra length because that is not quite the thickness of this aluminum to push out. So also I've got a bolt, another nut, and a washer. I'll show you. We're gonna kind of get that on there. So like I said, the idea is we're going to tighten this bolt down and drive my stack of nuts, in this case, or whatever you're using as a spacer, little socket perhaps, out that way, thus pushing the bearing out. And what I'm going to use on the outside is a bigger socket that'll go on like that. And as I tighten the nut on this end, it's going to, like I said, tighten everything together, therefore pushing the bearing out into this bigger socket. The socket is bigger than the bearing itself. I'm actually going to put the head of the bolt into my vise here, like so. I'm going to take my socket, my bigger socket, stack it on top there. I got a couple washers I'm going to put on top of there, and a nut, like so. Now, you want to go slow. Take your time, make sure everything's lined up properly. And again, the principle here is we are just tightening everything together, tightening that bearing up and out of the link into this bigger socket. So take your time, go slow. These really aren't ever pressed in super hard. So if it's not coming, chances are maybe you don't have something lined up, or worst case scenario, it's seized. And in that case, you know, seek professional help. So I'm going to start tightening this down. Oh, and I just felt it slip, which means it started to move. So we'll keep tightening. Usually I will take it apart just to make sure that it is coming. Let's go ahead and pop this apart. If you don't have all of this stuff, go down to your local hardware store, not like your Home Depot. Find your like Ace or True Value. Find the old dude that's down there. Tell him you're trying to pull some bearings out of something. Chances are he's done this. whether it's a car part, a bike part, something in his life, he's done this where he's cobbled together a bunch of stuff. Now, you can kind of see the bearing is starting to come right here. So I had everything lined up, everything's working together. Get yourself some threaded rod, some spacers, some washers, and you'll be able to do this. Pressing them in after the fact will be much easier, especially if you have a vise. Chances are if you don't have a vise, your dad, your buddy, your grandpa, your neighbor's got a vise. And depending on the size of the washers, I have a whole plethora of stuff down here, different sized sockets and spacers and washers and stuff that I gathered together because there was 3 different size bearings on this link, and it came out. So I would recommend cleaning around the bearing on both sides. Use a little bristle brush, a screwdriver, get some grease out of there, just to reduce the track of friction, impedance, if you will, so everything will come out as easily as it can. So, should we do one more? You guys want to do one more? Should we do one more? Let's do one more. We've got a bigger bearing here in the middle, and again, I'm using for the pusher part of the assembly, if you will, is another one of these flange nuts. The flange is because it's got the built-in washer. That's what I'm coming from there. These work really good. Real low profile. You don't have to stack a bunch of stuff. You don't need a super long bolt. Fits in there really nice. Just be sure that you're not pushing just on the inner part of the bearing. If you're pushing just on that, the bearing is going to want to push apart basically and follow the path of least resistance and come apart. You want to get, like I was saying earlier, as much of that covered as possible. Ideally, you'd even want to get some purchase on this outer part of the bearing, which really is not possible on these smaller ones, but cover as much surface area as you can. On this is kind of tricky because it's kind of an uneven surface. A nice piece of pipe or something would fit good. I had this random really big washer. I honestly don't remember what this is for. It's not perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a socket. The socket's actually not big enough for this bearing to fit up into, but it is big enough to kind of go on there and to get everything started. And then once we get it started, we'll switch over to another thing. This is not an exact science. Even if you had like the professional bearing extractor, it's not an exact science. You might still have to switch your setup as you kind of progress. I'm going to tighten this down and hopefully that bearing will pop. Oh, I think it started going. So we'll kind of get this going as much as we can until I feel it tighten, which means that the bearing is probably hitting on that socket. Let's pull it apart. And yep, that's exactly, bearing started to come out. I'm going to take this bigger piece, which is going to fit around the bearing. And I know this works because I did it on the other side already. Stack up my washers here. And if this was threaded all the way down, it would be ideal, but it's not. So I need to add a spacer in the form of another socket, a washer, a couple washers on there. Put my nut back down on there. Make sure everything's lined up as best as possible so that I am driving the washer up and out, not just up against one of those spacers. Kind of, like I said, slow. Get a feel for it. Just could feel it go loose, which I'm assuming means the bearing has popped out. And like I said, there it is. Well, that pretty much wraps it up. If that helped you out, please subscribe if you haven't already. Give the video a thumbs up and turn those notifications on so you don't miss the video I upload putting the bearings back in, but I think we need to apply a coating to that link before we put the bearings back in. And then of course we'll have to put that link onto a bike. So of course, stay tuned for that. Follow the links in the description down below over to my Instagram and my Facebook, where you see a lot of stuff like that. A lot of stuff involving the 4Runner, the Lexus that I've got sitting here, and things of that nature. So until the next video drops, thank you for watching. Take care. Goodbye.